Welcome to Mindful Healing, a channel where we reflect on the deeper truths of life, mindfulness, and philosophy together. You're washing the dishes, and out of nowhere, a random embarrassing memory from middle school pops into your head. Or maybe you're taking a peaceful walk, and suddenly your mind starts rehearsing what you'll say in next week's meeting. Have you ever felt like you've been pulled into a stream of thoughts that just appeared out of nowhere? Have you ever wondered, where do those thoughts even come from? And more importantly, who's thinking them? Today, we're going to unravel one of the most paradoxical and transformational questions in Buddhist philosophy. If you're not your thoughts, then who's thinking them? Stick with me until the end of this video, because you won't just get a philosophical answer. You might actually discover a whole new way of seeing yourself. A path toward clarity, peace, and real freedom from the chaos inside the mind. Over the next few chapters, we'll explore the nature of thought through the lens of Buddhist wisdom. Why do all thoughts arise from causes and conditions? Why is the so-called thinker just an illusion? And how can the mind, when trained through mindfulness, become an open field of awareness, no longer trapped in its own web? But before we dive into the deeper teachings, let me take you on a little journey. Imagine this. You're sitting beside a river. The water is flowing endlessly, never stopping, never repeating the same current. Each ripple is unique. Some are gentle, others wild and crashing. You just sit there watching. You're not jumping in, you're not resisting. That's your mind. Each thought is a ripple. And you're not the water, you're not the weeds, you're the observer. In Buddhism, this observer isn't a soul or some hidden self or a permanent being. It's awareness, and awareness, when nurtured, becomes the most powerful source of freedom in your life. We're going to meet ancient monks, modern scientists, and everyday people just like you who've dared to turn inward. There were queens who gave up their thrones, criminals who woke up to compassion, and mothers, fathers, friends, people all around us who chose the path of inner discovery. We'll ask some uncomfortable questions. What if the self you're protecting doesn't actually exist? What if peace isn't about stopping your thoughts, but seeing through them? And what if freedom isn't something you have to find, but something that's always been there, just hidden? If you're new to this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Join this growing community of deep thinkers, feelers, skeptics, and seekers, people who are all exploring the light within. Because this isn't just another video. This is a mirror for your mind, a mirror that doesn't reflect your face, but the awareness behind your face. All right, let's begin. Chapter 1, Thoughts are Echoes. Dependent origination in the untrained mind. In modern life, the mind is like a wild, playful child. It runs all over the place, jumping from one memory to another, from one feeling to a random worry. And the truth is, most of the time, we don't even notice it. We live as if we're being controlled by a voice in our head, a non-stop stream of thoughts. But in Buddhism, this isn't considered a flaw. No one is bribed for thinking too much. It's not some kind of glitch in the brain. On the contrary, it's actually solid proof of a deep and powerful truth. Dependent origination. Paticca Samuppada. Dependent originations. Everything has a reason. In Buddhist teachings, nothing exists on its own. Everything arises because of something else. A flower blooms because there's rain, sunlight, soil, and someone who cared for it. Our minds work the same way. Every thought, every emotion, every reaction is the result of a chain of causes, way longer than we might expect. For example, one afternoon you hear a piece of music and suddenly you feel sad. Why? Maybe that song reminds you of an old love, or maybe it just hits you when you're tired. Maybe it's tied to some forgotten moment from your childhood. We usually don't notice these connections. They happen so fast, so subconsciously. But that's dependent origination at work. Thoughts are echoes, not answers. A thought isn't something we create. It's more like a reflex, an echo of past experiences, a glance, a smell, a sensation. Any of those can trigger a whole cascade of thoughts. And often those thoughts don't make sense. They have no logic, no clear connection to what you're doing in that moment. You're driving, but your mind is arguing about something that happened last week. You're sitting in class, but your head is thinking about dinner. Why does this happen? Because the mind hasn't been trained. It has no real guide. It just reacts out of habit. And that habit is built from everything you've been exposed to over time. I often compare the mind to the weather. Some days it's sunny and clear. Other days it's cloudy or stormy. Sometimes it's peaceful like a still lake. Sometimes it's chaos. And just like the weather, you can't control it by force. You can't yell at the sky, stop raining, but you can prepare. Bring an umbrella, wear a raincoat, find shelter. Same thing with your thoughts. You can't stop them from coming, but you can understand them, observe them, and stop identifying with them. I once met a chess grandmaster. He told me his mind was always playing chess, even when he wasn't at the board. One time, while shopping at the grocery store, he caught himself unconsciously planning how to get around a crowd of people, just like he would plan a move to outmaneuver his opponent. He laughed, realizing that years of practice had literally programmed how his brain thinks. Even while pushing a shopping cart, his mind was still analyzing, reacting, and calculating. This wasn't some self actively choosing to think. It was a system of mental habits, built up over time. That's dependent origination in real life. Everything we see, study, remember, all of it creates the mind we live with today. So what do? We don't need to fight our thoughts. What we need is to understand them. Every thought has a cause. Everything you expose yourself to today will become your thoughts tomorrow. So if you want to change your mind, you have to change how you live, change how you react, change how you see the world. Thoughts aren't the enemy. The mind isn't something you need to crush with willpower. They are just echoes, results of everything you've lived, learned, and touched. They are echoes. Don't try to become the kind of person who never has vague, unconscious thoughts. Become the person who understands where those thoughts come from. And that is the first step toward freedom. Chapter 2, The Illusion of the Thinker, Anatta and the Search for Self. On the spiritual path, sometimes the most miraculous thing isn't that you find yourself, but that you realize there's no fixed self to find in the first place. Sounds funny, right? But it works. Just remember this, there's no fixed me to find. And in that very moment, freedom begins to bloom. When someone asks, "Who's thinking my thoughts?" our natural response is to believe there must be a me sitting somewhere inside, controlling everything, like someone behind a curtain in the mind, operating the machine, gripping the steering wheel of life, commanding the brain to produce thoughts, emotions, and actions. But pause for a second. Try this simple exercise. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, who is the one thinking right now? Don't try to answer it with words. Just look directly into your own experience. Not the thoughts themselves, but the one you assume is controlling them. What do you see? Most people, if they really look, will see nothing at all, just a stream of thoughts flowing by. One thought arises, then fades. A feeling comes, then slips away. There's no fixed owner, no solid thinker, just thinking happening. And that's the heart of what Buddhism calls anatta, non-self. One of the three marks of all existence, alongside impermanence and suffering. The Buddha never said people don't exist. He simply invited us to look deeply into what we call a person. And from that inquiry, he described our experience as made up of 5 aggregates: form, rupa, the physical body, its shape, and sensations; feeling, vedana; emotions, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral; perception, sanya; recognition, memory, the ability to label things; mental formations, sankhara; thoughts, intentions, habits, psychological patterns; consciousness, vijnana; awareness, the capacity to know what's happening. Among these 5, none is a self, none is unchanging. Each one is constantly shifting, appearing and disappearing, depending on conditions. Even the feeling of I am thinking is just a mental formation, a conditioned reaction. The self, a beautiful illusion. The issue isn't whether the self is real or not. The issue is that we believe in it absolutely. And from that belief, so many attachments, sufferings, expectations, and disappointments are born. Who do we think we are? A name, a past, Aboy, our dreams and our pain. But think about it. When you're in deep, dreamless sleep, where is that self? When you're fully absorbed in a movie and forget everything about yourself, does the self still exist in that moment? The truth is, the self we cling to is a process, not a thing. It's like a river, always moving, never the same from one moment to the next. I still remember the first time I seriously practiced Vipassana meditation. In one moment, as I simply watched my breath and the sensations in my body without reacting, I suddenly realized that me I always tried to protect, it wasn't there. There was no more I am observing. There was only observation happening. And you know what? That didn't feel scary at all. It felt light, vast, free. Like I had just taken off a heavy backpack I didn't know I was carrying all my life. That wasn't self-denial. That was letting go of an illusion. When you stop clinging to the self, you become more flexible, more peaceful, and more forgiving. You no longer need to be right or liked. You no longer need to defend a fragile identity from criticism. You no longer need to maintain some perfect image. And life becomes lighter. Thoughts still come, emotions still come, but you're no longer identified with them. You're no longer swept away. You observe, recognize, and release. Many people are afraid of the idea of non-self because they think it means nothing matters, or that it devalues human life. But actually, Anatta doesn't mean nothing exists. It just means there is no permanent, unchanging me. Instead, there is only life unfolding, alive, fresh, moment by moment. When you stop chasing after a solid identity, you begin to truly live each experience as it is. You become more real, not less. When the self dissolves, what remains isn't emptiness. It's pure awareness. Chapter 3, Awareness Beyond Thought. The silent observer. When you observe a thought, for example, I'm angry, and you simply acknowledge it as something that arises and passes away, you'll come to a deep realization. You are not the anger. You are the one who sees it. This subtle separation between a thought and the awareness of that thought is the beginning of inner freedom, and it's also the closest doorway to mindfulness. Mindfulness, sati, isn't about trying to stop thoughts or control the mind. It's the simple capacity to recognize what's happening in your body, in your mind, without judgment and without interference. Recent neuroscience has confirmed what the Buddha taught more than 2,500 years ago. When you practice mindfulness regularly, activity in the default mode network, DMN, the part of the brain involved in self-referencing, worrying, judging, and ruminating, actually decreases. What that means is, when you learn to just observe thoughts without identifying with them, the brain starts to let go of its habit of constantly telling a story about me. You start living more in the present, reacting less, and the mind becomes more calm and clear. Thoughts are like clouds, sometimes soft and light, sometimes dark and stormy. But the sky, your awareness, is always vast, still, and untouched. You don't need to make the clouds disappear. They will come and go on their own, by their own conditions. The only thing you really need to do is stop believing that you are the clouds. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are not your feelings of failure or joy. You are the sky that knows all of those things. Practicing mindfulness is simple, but it's revolutionary. You can start with something really small. When a thought shows up, just silently note, thinking. When a feeling arises, gently label it, angry, worried, happy. Then just watch it like an outsider. No analyzing, no judging, no trying to fix it. Just be there with the experience. Do this over and over, and you'll start to feel something open up inside. Things that used to make you feel out of control will now just pass by, like clouds drifting across the sky. Because now you remember, you are not the cloud, you are the sky. Chapter 4, Living with this understanding. Applying mindfulness in everyday life. This isn't about completely getting rid of thoughts or trying to control them. It's about learning how to live with them, wisely and mindfully. Thanks to thought, we're able to plan, learn, create, solve problems, and navigate life. The key is not letting thoughts control you, but knowing when to use them and when to let them go. That's exactly what the Buddha called yoniso manasikara, wise attention. It means directing our attention in a way that leads to understanding and liberation, instead of getting lost in confusion, delusion, and suffering. A real-life example, facing a tough problem. Let's say you're trying to solve a difficult math problem. What's actually happening inside your head? From a Buddhist perspective, this whole thinking process is simply mental formations, sankhara, arising due to certain conditions. You have the intention to solve the problem. That's one type of mental action. Then memories of similar problems, knowledge you've learned, and new ideas begin to surface. These are more sankharas. These mental formations interact, combine, and evolve, all within the space of your awareness. So what's the key? When you practice mindfulness, you no longer identify with this process. You're not caught in the struggle. Instead, you're observing this whole thing happening and fading without clinging to the outcome. That creates inner space, a kind of mental clarity where intuition and insight can arise. Practice a simple roadmap to mindful living. Intention. Set the foundation. Start with a clear intention like, I want to understand and approach this problem with calm and clarity. That intention sets the tone for your whole mental process. Observation. Mindfulness in action. As you work, observe your thoughts, emotions, strategies as they arise. Notice frustration, dead ends, or even new ideas. Don't interfere. Just observe. Space. Create pause and room. Instead of forcing a solution, give yourself space. Take a break, breathe deeply, or step away. This isn't procrastination. It's allowing space for wisdom to surface. Equanimity. Stay balanced. Understand that the answer may take time. Be present with the process, not obsessed with the result. Intuition. Let insight arise. When clarity shows up, welcome it gently. Don't cling to it. Don't make it about ego. Just acknowledge it, like watching a flower bloom. How do you live mindfully all day long? Not just when meditating, but also while eating, talking, working, washing dishes, driving, or listening to someone. Mindfulness isn't some advanced state you can only reach deep in the forest. It's a way of living, a mental attitude you can carry into every little thing you do. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not the story your mind keeps telling about who you are. You are awareness, wordless, formless, needing no proof. And from this very moment, you can always return. Return to the breath. Return to the present. Return to yourself, the one who knows they are alive. Thank you for journeying with Mindful Healing. If this video has been helpful, share it as a gift of mindfulness. And always remember, every moment is an opportunity to return to the freedom that's already within you. See you again on the next part of the journey. May you be well with every breath you take.